Picture this. You're standing outside the ruins of what was once the greatest city in India. The year is 1398. The air is so thick with the smell of death that you can taste it on your tongue, metallic, sweet, revolting. Smoke rises from 1,000 fires, turning the sky the colour of old blood. And there, rising from the carnage like some grotesque architectural marvel, stands a pyramid. But this isn't made of limestone or sandstone. This pyramid is built from 100,000 human skulls. Each skull was once a person, a merchant, a mother, a child, a soldier who thought he'd see tomorrow. The man who ordered this monument? He's watching from a silk pavilion, sipping wine, dictating poetry to his scribes about the beauty of order and the divine nature of conquest. His name is Timur. History would call him Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, but there was nothing lame about what he did to the world. This is the story of a man who killed so many people that historians still can't agree on the death toll. Some say 17 million, others say 20 million. In a world of only 365 million people, that's roughly 5% of humanity, erased. This is the story of how one limping warlord from nowhere became the most feared man on earth, built one of history's most beautiful cities on rivers of blood, and left behind monuments that still whisper warnings to anyone who dares disturb them. This is the story of ambitions so vast, it swallowed civilizations whole. And it all began with a boy born into chaos. The year is 1336. Central Asia is a graveyard of empires. Genghis Khan's Mongol Empire, once the largest continuous land empire in human history, has shattered into warring fragments. Tribal leaders fight over scraps of territory. Cities that once thrived on the Silk Road now burn every few years as different warlords claim them. Into this world of blood and dust, a boy is born near Samarkand, in what is now Uzbekistan. His name is Timur, and he comes from minor nobility, barely a footnote in the chaotic genealogy of Mongol succession. His family claims descent from Genghis Khan himself, though the connection is distant, almost mythical. It's enough to give him prestige, but not power. Not yet. As a child, Timur learns what every boy of his time learns: how to ride a horse before he can properly walk, how to shoot an arrow while galloping at full speed, how to survive in a world where mercy is a luxury reserved for the dead. But Timur learns something else too, something that will define his entire existence. He learns that in a world of violence, the only thing that matters is the story people tell about you when you're not in the room. As a young man, probably in his 20s, Timur is wounded in battle. The details are murky. Some say he was fighting as a mercenary, others claim he was rustling sheep and got caught. What matters is the result. An arrow, or perhaps a sword, cripples his right leg. Another injury leaves his right arm partially useless. From that day forward, he walks with a pronounced limp, one shoulder hanging lower than the other. His enemies mockingly call him Timuri Lang, Timur the Lame, which Europeans will eventually corrupt into Tamerlane. Most men would see this as the end of their military ambitions. Timur sees it as a test. He spends years recovering, adapting, learning to fight from horseback where his injuries matter less. He studies the tactics of Genghis Khan obsessively, reading every account he can find. He learns about psychological warfare, about speed and surprise, about the power of reputation. And he makes himself a promise. If he cannot be the strongest man in the room, he will be the most feared. By his late 20s, Timur begins his real ascent. He doesn't start with armies or grand declarations. He starts small, gathering loyal followers, making strategic marriages, forging alliances with more powerful warlords while secretly undermining them. He's patient, methodical. When he kills, it's always with purpose. In 1370, after years of maneuvering, betrayals and strategic murders, Timur finally seizes control of Samarkand. He's 34 years old. He doesn't declare himself Khan. That title belongs to descendants of Genghis Khan, and despite his claims, Timur's bloodline isn't direct enough. Instead, he takes the title Amir, commander, military leader, the power behind the throne. He keeps a puppet Khan on the throne and rules from the shadows, but everyone knows who really holds the sword. Timur's early campaigns are brutal, but not yet legendary. He conquers the surrounding regions, bringing warlords to heel, uniting the fractured territories of Central Asia under his banner. And that's when he introduces his signature tactic, the one that will define his reign. After conquering the city of Sabzavar in Persia around 1383, following a rebellion that killed several of his soldiers, Timur orders the entire population executed. But he doesn't just kill them. He orders their heads cut off, cleaned, and stacked into towers. 2,000 skulls, arranged in neat pyramids around the city gates. When travelers see them, they spread the word. By the time Timur's army approaches the next city, the defenders have already heard the stories. Many surrender without a fight. This is Timur's genius. He understands that one act of overwhelming horror can replace 100 battles. The skulls aren't just revenge, they're advertising. Kill 2,000 to terrify 2 million. Modern historians call it terror as statecraft, but Timur would have called it efficiency. Every skull tower served multiple purposes. First, intimidation. No city wanted to be next. Surrender became the rational choice. Second, control. Even after conquest, the sight of those bone monuments reminded populations what would happen if they rebelled. Third, reputation. With every pyramid, Timur's legend grew. By the time he arrived at a new city, his reputation had already done half the work. Fourth, immortality. Timur was obsessed with being remembered. Each tower was a monument, a chapter in the epic of his life that couldn't be erased. But here's what makes Timur truly disturbing. He didn't do this in a rage. He was methodical, almost artistic about it. He would sit in his camp, calmly giving orders about the exact arrangement of skulls, the height of the pyramids, the placement at city gates. He treated mass murder like urban planning. And then, that same evening, he would invite scholars to his tent to discuss astronomy, mathematics, and poetry. In 1393, Timur turns his full attention to Persia and Iraq. Baghdad, once the crown jewel of Islamic civilization, the city that gave the world algebra, advanced medicine, and the House of Wisdom, now lies under the rule of a sultan Timur considers weak and heretical. The pretext is politics and religion, but everyone knows the truth. Baghdad is rich, and Timur needs gold to fund his ever-expanding war machine and his vision for Samarkand. When Timur's army arrives, Baghdad's defenders fight desperately. The city has walls, experienced soldiers, and the weight of centuries of civilization behind it. It doesn't matter. Timur's tactics are ruthless and innovative. He uses prisoners as human shields. He redirects rivers to flood defensive positions. His archers are so skilled, they can shoot fire arrows into specific windows while riding at full gallop. After weeks of siege, Baghdad falls, and then the systematic destruction begins. Timur gives an order. Every soldier must bring him 2 severed heads, not 1, 2. Soldiers who don't meet the quota are executed themselves. The massacre lasts for days. The streets run red. Libraries that survived the Mongol invasion of 1258 are burned again. Mosques that stood for centuries are razed. When the killing finally stops, 90,000 heads are stacked into pyramids around the city. One witness, a Muslim scholar named Ibn Arabshah, who survived the massacre as a young man, later wrote, "The city that was once the navel of the world became its open wound." Isfahan, in Persia, initially gets lucky. When Timur's army approaches in 1387, the city's leaders immediately surrender. They pay tribute, open their gates, and promise cooperation. Timur, satisfied, moves on. Isfahan is spared, but then something happens. Some accounts say it was an accident, others claim it was a planned uprising. One night, a group of Isfahan's citizens attacked Timur's tax collectors and soldiers left behind to garrison the city. Several hundred of Timur's men are killed. When word reaches Timur, he doesn't hesitate, he doesn't negotiate, he doesn't ask for explanations. He turns his entire army around and marches back to Isfahan. This time, there will be no mercy. The massacre that follows is systematic and complete. Every man, woman, and child in the city is hunted down. Houses are searched room by room. People hiding in wells are burned out with fire. Those who fled to the mountains are tracked by scouts and executed. When it's over, 70,000 heads are collected. But this time, Timur orders something different. Instead of simple pyramids, He commands his engineers to build elaborate towers, minarets of skulls, each one carefully constructed with mortar made from lime and human remains. The towers are built at intervals around the city, each one visible from the next. At night, guards light fires at their bases, making them glow against the darkness like beacons of bone. Travelers report that weeks later, when the wind blew through these towers, they made a whistling sound, high-pitched, eerie, like thousands of voices crying out in unison. The people of Isfahan said the dead were singing warnings to the living. By 1398, Timur is 62 years old, ancient by medieval standards, especially for a warrior who spent his entire life on campaign. Most men his age would be thinking about succession, about securing their legacy, about rest. Timur is planning his largest invasion yet. India, specifically the Delhi Sultanate, represents everything Timur craves: unimaginable wealth, a massive population to conquer and tax, and a chance to claim he's surpassing even Genghis Khan's achievements. He frames the invasion in religious terms, claiming the Sultan of Delhi is too tolerant of Hindus and other heretics. He positions himself as a holy warrior, purifying the land in the name of Islam. But the letters he sends to his governors tell a different story. Send back gold, all the gold you can carry. His army, 90,000 strong, crosses the Indus River in September 1398. The invasion is timed perfectly, after the monsoon season but before winter makes the mountain passes impassable. As they march toward Delhi, Timur's forces destroy everything in their path. Not just military targets, everything. Villages that submit are looted, villages that resist are burned, temples are demolished, monasteries are stripped of anything valuable and then razed. The goal isn't just conquest, it's erasure. Sultan Mahmud Tughlaq, ruler of Delhi, knows Timur is coming. He assembles the largest army he can muster. Estimates range from 40,000 to 100,000 men. His secret weapon? 120 war elephants, each armoured in steel plates, with soldiers and archers on their backs and flaming swords mounted on their tusks. War elephants are the tanks of the medieval world, nearly unstoppable, terrifying to behold, capable of crushing infantry lines and breaking cavalry charges. When scouts report the elephants to Timur, his generals are nervous. Timur isn't. He studied military history obsessively. He knows that Alexander the Great centuries earlier defeated Indian elephants by exploiting their one weakness. They're animals, and animals can panic. Timur orders his men to collect every camel in the region. Hundreds of camels are brought to camp. Bundles of hay and dried grass are loaded onto their backs. When the battle begins on December 17, 1398, the two armies face each other across the plains outside Delhi. Sultan Mahmud orders the elephant charge. 120 massive beasts, armour glinting in the sun, trumpeting their war cries, thundering toward Timur's lines. It looks like certain victory. And then Timur gives the signal. His soldiers light the hay on the camels' backs and drive the panicked, burning animals directly at the elephants. What happens next is chaos. The elephants, confronted with these screaming, flaming creatures, do exactly what Timur predicted. They panic, they turn, they stampede. Not forward into Timur's army, but backward into their own. Mahmud's carefully arranged battle lines collapse in minutes. The elephants trample thousands of the Sultan's own soldiers. Archers fire wildly. Infantry breaks and runs. Timur's cavalry sweeps in from the flanks. His archers rain arrows into the confusion. And by sundown, the battle is over. The Sultan flees. Delhi is defenseless. Timur enters Delhi on December 18, 1398. For the first day, he maintains discipline. His soldiers are ordered not to kill civilians. Looting is controlled and systematic. It almost seems like Delhi might be spared the worst. But on the second day, something shifts. Different sources give different explanations. Some say Delhi's citizens started a riot. Others claim Timur's soldiers simply couldn't resist the wealth around them and discipline broke down. A few historians suggest Timur planned it all along, and the first day of restraint was just theatre. Whatever the trigger, the result is catastrophic. For 3 full days, Timur's army kills without restraint. Men are hunted through the streets. Women and children are dragged from their homes. The wealthy are tortured to reveal where they've hidden their treasures, then killed anyway. The poor are killed for sport. Delhi, called the crown of the world, a city of literature, art, music and learning, becomes a slaughterhouse. The exact death toll is disputed. Contemporary sources claim 100,000 dead. Modern historians think it might have been higher. And then the order comes. Build me a monument. Every skull is collected, cleaned, sorted, and then, with the same careful attention Timur applies to everything, they're stacked into pyramids. The largest stands taller than the city's minarets, a mountain of human heads, visible for miles, standing as a testament to what happens when you stand in Timur's way. When the pyramids are complete, Timur holds a victory feast. Musicians play, poets recite verses about glory and divine favour, wine flows freely, and in the background, visible through the silk walls of his pavilion, the skull towers stand silent under the stars. 2 weeks later, Timur loads his army with gold, jewels, slaves and elephants, and marches back to Samarkand. He leaves Delhi in ruins. It would take decades for the city to recover. Some neighbourhoods never did. Here's where Timur becomes truly fascinating and truly disturbing. Because the same man who built pyramids of skulls was simultaneously creating one of the most beautiful cities in human history. Samarkand, Timur's capital, becomes a jewel of Islamic architecture. He pours the wealth from dozens of conquered nations into transforming it into a paradise on earth. The Registan, a grand square surrounded by madrasas covered in turquoise tiles that seem to glow in the desert sun. The Bibi Kanim Mosque, so large it could hold 10,000 worshippers, its dome visible from every corner of the city. The Shah-i-Zinda, a street of mausoleums so ornate, so covered in geometric patterns and calligraphy, that visitors said walking through it was like stepping into heaven itself. Gardens with fountains, observatories for astronomers, libraries filled with manuscripts from conquered lands, markets selling goods from China to the Mediterranean. But here's the dark truth. Every beautiful thing in Samarkand was built by slaves. After each conquest, Timur would select the most skilled artisans, architects from Damascus, calligraphers from Baghdad, tile workers from Persia, stone carvers from India, and send them in chains to Samarkand. They were given a choice: build my paradise or die. Most chose to build, so Samarkand rose from the desert, a city of impossible beauty, its foundations quite literally built on the bones of millions. What kind of man was Timur? By all accounts, he was deeply intelligent, fluent in Persian and Turkic, interested in history, astronomy, mathematics, and military strategy. He memorized vast portions of the Quran and loved discussing theology with scholars. He was a patron of the arts, commissioning epic poems about his conquests and supporting musicians and painters. He was also a devoted family man who adored his wives and grandchildren, often bringing them on campaign so he could see them every day. And yet, this same man could order 100,000 people executed and then sit down to enjoy a meal while watching the pyramids being built. Ibn Arabsha, the scholar who survived Baghdad's destruction and later wrote a biography of Timur, describes meeting him. He sits with the posture of a broken man, his body twisted by old wounds, but his eyes are those of a hunting bird, sharp, calculating, missing nothing. He speaks softly, almost kindly, and then, without changing his tone, he orders a man flayed alive for a minor insult. This wasn't insanity, it was calculation. Timur believed he was chosen by God to reshape the world. The deaths weren't cruelty, they were pruning. The pyramids weren't revenge, they were education. In his mind, he was creating a better world. The fact that he had to destroy the old world completely to do it was simply the cost of progress. By 1400, Timur controls an empire stretching from India to the Mediterranean. He's the most powerful man in the world, and he's not done. Syria becomes his next target, particularly the city of Damascus, another jewel of Islamic civilization, famous for its steel, its scholars, and its wealth. When Timur arrives, Damascus tries to negotiate. The city's leaders offer tribute, offer to submit peacefully. Timur agrees. Then, once inside the city walls, he changes his mind. Damascus is sacked. The Great Mosque, one of the oldest and most revered in Islam, is stripped of its treasures. Libraries are burned. Artisans are rounded up and sent to Samarkand. And the skull towers rise again. But this conquest brings Timur into direct conflict with the Ottoman Empire, the rising Islamic power to the west, led by Sultan Bayezid I, known as Bayezid the Thunderbolt for his speed in warfare. Bayezid is everything Timur is: brilliant, ruthless, ambitious. He's also younger, with a fresh army and a chip on his shoulder. The two men exchange letters, each one dripping with veiled insults and threats. Bayezid calls Timur a barbarian from the steppes. Timur calls Bayezid a pretender playing at empire. War is inevitable. The two armies meet at Ankara in 1402. Bayezid commands roughly 85,000 men, Ottoman soldiers, Serbian knights and various vassals. Timur fields 140,000, his veteran warriors from dozens of campaigns. The battle lasts from dawn to dusk. Bayezid's Serbian knights, some of the finest heavy cavalry in the world, charge Timur's centre and nearly break through. But Timur has a trick. He secretly negotiated with some of Bayezid's vassals to switch sides mid-battle. At the crucial moment, as Bayezid commits his reserves, large sections of his army suddenly turn and attack his flanks. The Ottoman line collapses. Bayezid tries to escape but is captured. Timur, showing a rare moment of what might be respect for a worthy opponent, treats Bayezid relatively well, keeping him as an honoured prisoner rather than executing him. But Bayezid, the proud thunderbolt, can't bear the humiliation. According to some accounts, Timur keeps him in a gilded cage, parading him at feasts. Within a year, Bayezid is dead. Some say from a stroke, others claim he killed himself. The Ottoman Empire, which seemed unstoppable, is thrown into civil war. It will take decades to recover. And Timur, now almost 70 years old, has defeated the most powerful empire in the Islamic world. There's only one target left worthy of his attention: China. The Ming dynasty of China is the richest empire on earth. Its population is enormous, its armies vast, its treasures legendary. Timur, despite his age, decides this will be his final conquest, the one that will cement his place above even Genghis Khan. In late 1404, he assembles an army of 200,000 men, the largest force he's ever commanded. The logistics alone are staggering. Supplies for months, thousands of horses, siege equipment that has to be dragged across mountain passes. They march northeast, toward the Sirdaria River, in the dead of winter. This is Timur's fatal mistake. He's survived dozens of battles, countless assassination attempts, wounds that would have killed lesser men. But he can't survive the cold. In December 1404, in a small town called Otrar, Timur falls ill. High fever, chills, weakness. His doctors try everything: medieval medicine, prayers, potions. Nothing works. For weeks he lingers between life and death. His generals wait, uncertain. The army, camped in the freezing steppes, begins to suffer from exposure and disease. On February 17, 1405, Timur dies. He's 68 years old. His last words, according to court historians, are, "I am not done." But he is. Timur's body is brought back to Samarkand with full honours. He's buried in the Guri Amir, the tomb of the ruler, a magnificent mausoleum with a turquoise dome that still stands today. His tomb is made of jade, a single block of dark green jade, one of the largest ever carved. Above it, an inscription in Arabic: "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." And below, another inscription, this one more ominous: "Whosoever disturbs my tomb shall unleash a conqueror more terrible than I." For centuries, this is just legend, superstition, the kind of curse every ancient ruler claims. And then, on June 19, 1941, Soviet archaeologists arrive at the Guri Amir. Stalin has ordered them to open Timur's tomb as part of a historical research project. Local elders beg them not to. They say the curse is real, that disturbing Timur's rest will bring disaster. The archaeologists laugh it off. They break the seals. They open the jade sarcophagus. Inside, they find Timur's mummified body, surprisingly well preserved, wrapped in silk, his twisted leg and damaged arm clearly visible. They photograph everything. They take measurements. They catalogue his remains. 2 days later, Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. It's the largest military invasion in human history. Over 3 million German soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 7,000 artillery pieces, 2,500 aircraft, all crushing across the Soviet border. Within weeks, millions are dead, cities are burning, the Soviet Union is fighting for its survival. The archaeologists, now evacuated from Samarkand as the war spreads, remember the curse. In 1942, Soviet officials quietly order Timur's remains reburied with full Islamic rites, a Muslim funeral, prayers, the works. Shortly after, the tide of the war begins to turn. The Germans are stopped at Stalingrad. Coincidence? Almost certainly. But to this day, in Uzbekistan, elders still say, "Don't wake the dead." Timur's empire doesn't survive him. His sons and grandsons immediately begin fighting over the succession. The vast territory he spent a lifetime conquering fragments within years. But the military empire? The terror state? It crumbles. Within a century, the Timurids are reduced to regional powers. Within 2 centuries, they're gone entirely, swept away by new empires, but the memory remains. So who was Timur really? Historians have debated this for 6 centuries. The traditional Western view: he was a monster, a barbarian destroyer who set civilization back centuries. His skull pyramids were acts of pure evil, his beauty building in Samarkand just window dressing for mass murder. The Central Asian view: he was a great ruler who united a fractured region, patronized the arts and sciences, and built monuments that still inspire awe. Yes, he was violent, but by the standards of his time, no more so than other conquerors. The academic middle ground: he was a complex figure who perfectly embodied the contradictions of medieval empire building. He combined genuine appreciation for culture and learning with calculated, instrumental violence. His cruelty wasn't sadism, it was policy. The truth is probably all of these, and none of these. Timur killed an estimated 5% of the world's population. That's roughly equivalent to 400 million people today. He also created architectural wonders that survive 600 years later, promoted science and learning, and his court became a center of Islamic culture. He built pyramids of skulls and gardens of flowers. He recited poetry and ordered mass executions. He was, in the end, entirely human, which might be the most terrifying thing about him. Today, Timur is a national hero in Uzbekistan. His statue stands in Tashkent. His image is on currency. Schools teach about his greatness. The skull pyramids are barely mentioned. In Iran, India, Iraq and Syria, the places he destroyed, he's remembered very differently. He's the destroyer, the scourge, the man who burned libraries and killed scholars. And everywhere, historians struggle with the same question. How do you evaluate a man whose legacy is so contradictory? Can you admire Samarkand's beauty while condemning the slaves who built it? Can you study his military genius while acknowledging the mountains of corpses it created? Can you be both a builder and a destroyer? Timur would say yes. He'd say that's what greatness requires. Today, if you travel through Central Asia, the Middle East, or India, you won't find Timur's skull pyramids. The wind scattered them centuries ago. The bones returned to dust. Nature reclaimed what terror built. But in the architecture of Samarkand, in the histories written by survivors, in the folk memories passed down through generations, Timur's presence remains. He got what he wanted: immortality. His name echoes through 6 centuries. We're still talking about him, still debating him, still trying to understand how one man could contain such extremes. And maybe that's the real lesson of Timur's story. History isn't simple. Humans aren't simple. We're capable of creating breathtaking beauty and unimaginable horror, often at the same time, often for the same reasons. Timur believed that to be remembered, you had to be extraordinary, and you could be extraordinarily good or extraordinarily terrible. The important key was that the world would never forget. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to your channel and see all the latest videos first.